This is a Two Front podcast.
You got a crooked smile, well that don't bother me much. You double overworking, double time, you double tough. I'll just shine it up until the sun hit like a glare. I gotta dare, get the fuck up out the chair.
Happy Dentist Gang, let me paint you a picture. Everything you learned in dental school about fluoride might be completely wrong. What if I told you that the substance that we've been applying to our patients' teeth for decades might actually be causing cognitive decline? And what if the real cause of grinding teeth isn't actually stress, but something much more fundamental? Today's guest is the boundary-pushing Beverly Hills dentist who's challenging everything we know about preventative care. Dr. Victor Khatchaturian, welcome to the Happy Dentist.
Yeah, Victor and I have been friends for a long time, and so I just want to start very light, Victor, and just say, what are your thoughts on fluoride?
Yeah, immediate cancellation, right? So truth is, I've been vocally anti-fluoride for a long time, but the thing is, I have a balanced view of it, right? So, I don't agree that one thing should be cast as a mass dispersion, that everything is bad all the time. I just think our view of fluoride is super outdated and how we use it in the US. So,
Which is a lot of dentistry, actually.
yeah, and it's great what you guys are doing and trying to get people to change their mentality. The idea is if you can get someone to change their mentality about something, they might be able to change their mentality about everything. So in short, our history of fluoride and how we came to it is, not as well researched. We're just told in dental school that it fights cavities, it takes the place of hydroxyapatite, and it's like learning about mitochondria in school. We all just know it's the powerhouse of the cell, and then you don't know anything else about it afterwards, right? So I'm anti water fluoridation. I'm anti the concept that you should have no choice in the US whether or not you're getting fluoride. I think on a balance, I think there's room for fluoride in some practices. Geriatric patients and elder care, like we never talk about them because that's not sexy, but like they could use, stannous fluoride. There's populations that need it, but just giving everyone fluoride in an uncontrolled manner in their water system has proven problematic. And the studies that were done, they don't continue. It was kind of a test subject when they released it in Michigan in the 50s, and they just never kind of followed up with it. So,
Well, Victor, a lot of the recent pushback from fluoride came from that fairly recent study, I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago, showing that in children it can impact the
brain development.
yeah.
yeah.
So there's a direct correlation in areas of higher fluoridation to negative cognitive effects and lower IQ levels, right?
That's what I was looking for. Yeah.
So the interesting thing about that was a study that was commissioned to kind of shut people like me up. So it was an actual government led research project that took a couple of years, and then they looked at the results and realized they didn't back what they were hoping.
And they
for.
actually published it. That's pretty. That's
Well,
pretty
it took
amazing.
lawsuits. It took a number of lawsuits to get that to come to light. So if it was what they thought it was, what they were hoping for is like let's just put this to bed, and it completely backfired. And it took a concerted effort by different groups to actually make them release this information. So it's a long-term study over a number of years, large population study. When it comes to stuff like this, of course, there's some factorial things
Sure.
going on, but there's a very strong correlation there.
Why do you think some sectors are still pushing for fluoride? What is the intention behind the intention, if there is one?
So I think there's two parts. There's water fluoridation and then what we have in our dental office. Water fluoridation, a huge part of that, it's a waste byproduct. And if tomorrow we say you can't fluoridate the water, there's going to be a huge issue with where you put that fluoride, because that fluoride is a waste product from a lot of different companies. The biggest one is fertilizer producers, which doesn't sound like it's all that important, but in order to have farmland and feed a country, you need a lot of poop.
And that's
And
put in our water?
that's actually where the vast majority of fluoride that's put in the water comes from. So pre-water fluoridation, fluoride used to be released as a gas into the air. And what it was doing, it was destroying crops. It was the original Monsanto. So it was destroying crops. It was affecting, cows and different. You can tell I've never been on a farm, so it was affecting whatever animals are out there. So it was having a huge effect on the food supply. And then they had to find a way to. They came up with these things called scrubbers. None of this stuff sounds serious to kind of get you to kind of undermine it, but there are these things called scrubbers that catch the fluoride being released into the air, and then they need a place to deposit it. And the next likely thing was water. So that's where the majority of the fluoride we get is from.
You know that sinking feeling when the same patient keeps coming back for crown after crown? Yeah, we've all been there. Here's the thing: what if we could actually prevent all that mess with a simple bite correction? That's where we come in at Two Front. We handle the whole Invisalign process for you. I'm talking zero ClinChecks, zero lab bills, barely any chair time. Oh, and we take on the liability too. Your patient gets a healthy bite that'll save them thousands down the road. You get to be the hero who prevented years of dental drama. It's honestly a no brainer. Check out Two Front and start helping your patients dodge a lifetime of dental work today.
Victor, I mean, I know that when I see, let's say, a 30-year-old person and they've never had a filling, they've never had anything, many times they grew up with fluoride in their water, right? So
Sure.
I think we can all agree that fluoride helps with decay, right? So if you're going against water fluoridation, we still have the advantages of fluoride in our toothpaste? Should we still be doing fluoride treatments at our practices? What is the balance here? Is it just no fluoride? Because we do know that fluoride is not great for the brain, right? But is that a threshold question, or is that a all or nothing? Or is it a balance, right? Is it like, well, let's make a little bit of damage in the brain as long as they don't have decay?
Sure.
Wild.
That's my approach is we should know the risks and benefits, right? And the current belief is that it's all benefit, right? And there's a direct link. And you might be thinking, well, 30 years old, that person's IQ is their IQ, but fluoride directly affects melatonin production. So, you know, it takes the place of melatonin production in the pineal gland. And it's funny because when you talk to dentists and you mention the effect of fluoride on the pineal gland, people laugh it off. I don't know if it's a funny gland, but this is neurochemistry. Like they're literally brain brain surgeons that their whole life is that gland. So anybody that that's taking drugs to fall asleep, which is a large portion of the population, could do with more naturally produced melatonin. But most people,
There's studies showing that over 60% of dentists have sleep problems.
yeah. So it's just the approach that I take is you should know more about fluoride. Like if I have an infection, I'm going to use an antibiotic, but I wouldn't take penicillin every single day on the off chance I might have an infection.
Right. I
So
mean, we even stopped prescribing antibiotics for every extraction. I mean, I know early in my career that we were taught to do that. And then about maybe 7 or 8 years ago, they said, hey, stop doing that.
So Victor, I'm not very well versed in fluoride. Like when my friends ask me like what are your thoughts on fluoride? To be honest, like I don't trust half the studies out there. So I know you've gone really deep on this on both water fluoridation and also in-office fluoride. What have you found from studies that you actually trust, which I'm assuming are like double-blind clinical control trials?
yeah. So the first thing is there's not a ton of those. So a lot of the fluoride research comes from uh, areas where the money's being, who's really looking into fluoride other
Who's
than,
funding it? Right.
yeah, who's funding it? The funding usually comes from toothpaste companies. So funny enough, their toothpaste is always amazing. Um, so the idea is, I put on this sort of kind of crunchy or kind of more holistic mindset once I had a child. And, now I became responsible for somebody else's health, and the idea is when you do a deep dive, the things that you kind of learn are, you know, kids are swallowing a lot more fluoride in their toothpaste than when they've done studies on this. Kids are swallowing a lot more fluoride in their toothpaste than one would have assumed. When we do the fluoride trays in the chair, kids are swallowing a ton of that. So the concept has always been fluoride's safe as long as you just don't eat the whole tube. That's not true. We know enough now to know that the amount that we're getting is significantly more than we were ever intended to have. So the idea being is you have to look at your patient base. It sounds silly, but what Kyle said is somewhat true. If you're looking, you have to understand that there are risks and do a risk benefit ratio. Now, the great thing is we have alternatives. We have for a number of years, especially in the US, nanohydroxyapatite, which was developed by the US, by NASA, literally was not in the country for 50 years. So we
But it was in
developed,
Japan, right?
yeah.
Wow.
So NASA developed it for uh, astronauts. Obviously, that's what they do, and the reason they had to develop it is fluoride is such an unstable compound. They didn't want it on space stations and on space flights, so they knew enough. Rocket scientists and brain surgeons think it's bad, but dentists laugh at this. So they had to come up with a compound. They invented nanohydroxyapatite, and a Japanese company like literally bought the patent to it, and it was in Japan for 50 years. So you have an island. If you want to study, if you want a great study, Japan is a great study. It's an island where they've been using nanohydroxyapatite for multiple decades instead of
And
fluoride,
no fluoride.
and no fluoride.
So,
And
from what you studied, do you think hydroxyapatite can replace fluoride?
you know, uh, I think it's better. I don't think it's perfect. We're still, if we've had a 70-year head start on fluoride, and we have very poor research on that. So nanohydroxyapatite is just kind of getting its um, limelight right now. So the early indications are, there's specifications. The EU actually released specifications in the last couple of years on which particle size is safe. So we have some research to suggest it's better. We do know that it doesn't have the cognitive side effects, and as just for myself, but particularly as a parent, I'm a dentist. I care more about my child's brain than I care about his teeth. So I'll always take that risk tooth-wise, over cognitive decline.
It's funny that when I think of we've had hydroxyapatite for so long in other places, but now people are looking at it like, oh, it's some new thing. I don't know if it's as good
Mm.
as this fluoride that we've had for decades. It's kind of like when composites came out, right? It was like, well, we've had amalgams, they've worked forever. These composites, they're kind of new. Now, in their defense, old composites did kind of suck, but it was like, oh, they don't work. Well, yeah, if you do it like an amalgam, it doesn't work, right? And it's not going to work as well. It's kind of the same thing. And I see this time and time again with dentistry. I'm sure everybody said the same thing to Christian, like I remember the first time I heard Christians say, we don't need to use articulators, and they can even cause more problems, and like people's minds blew up. But I think it's just the challenge of changing in dentistry.
I would assume the first round of Invisalign wasn't great.
It wasn't. I was one of
Oh,
the
it
early
was
patients,
horrible.
actually. It was horrible. Yeah, but I've had it another time, and it's way
You know,
better.
I guess, like, as a consumer, like, obviously, we only have 10 years or whatever it is of this hydroxyapatite data. Where my mind goes is like, "Okay, well, like, what are the side effects of a hydroxyapatite?" Like, we don't have enough data on that either, and I know I've got 4 younger sisters, and 2 of my sisters recently, who, of course, are sisters to dentists, they brush every day, twice a day, they floss, and they use fluoride, and they both got a bunch of cavities. So I'm like, fluoride isn't a one oh, and they don't drink soda or anything like that. So if it's not a one-stop shop, like, why are we risking this particle, whether it's fluoride or hydroxyapatite, at all?
Well, we have some research on, because Japan's been using this thing for 50 years, and they're not showing these cognitive declines that we're seeing with higher fluoridation. The issue is that whether whether you think it's one or the other, fluoride is so misunderstood by the dental community. It doesn't work nearly as well as we think it does. It does have I will be the first to admit that it does have a localized benefit. It does help cavities, but it has cognitive effects. It has skeletal defects that it doesn't make your tooth necessarily more resistant to decay. It makes your tooth more brittle. It makes all bone more brittle. So it has enough side effects that even if hydroxyapatite we find out is not this perfect savior tomorrow, we have enough data to suggest it's at least better. And if nothing else, my goal, it doesn't benefit me one way or another. I don't have a toothpaste company, but the goal of why I bring it up to other people, I learned it for my son and I could have just kept my mouth shut, but we have so many things we need to change in dentistry that for me, it's just, if I can get toothpaste, if I can get you to change your mind or at least open your mind about toothpaste, I'm not going to be able to get you to start thinking completely differently when it comes to like airway treatment and completely revolutionizing what you think a good dental outcome is.
So a couple take-home messages here. In your opinion, we should never buy toothpaste with fluoride. Period.
For our kids, never. For somebody who doesn't have high caries incidence, if you can get hydroxyapatite, get it instead. It should be used as a last resort.
Got it. And what about the water? If you could choose the water in US with or without?
Without. We have enough data from other countries to suggest that the water fluoridation isn't helping that much. The one thing that always gets missed in these arguments pro and anti-fluoride is when you fluoridate the water, even if you filter out the water that you're drinking, you're still getting fluoride in everything else. So if you have a tomato, it was water.
Oh my God.
So you're still getting it. If you eat a steak, that cow drank water.
Drinking tap water,
Out.
0.
Yeah. For a number of reasons, fluoride might be the lowest on that list, but yeah, for sure.
I want to make sure we have enough time with our other topics today, but I want to ask one more question about this because I have seen some people push back on hydroxyapatite and say that it's not really regulated. And so like there are problems with particle size and because it's not really regulated by the FDA right now
but it's better to have nothing, right? As you're saying, Victor, better to have none of them than to have fluoride.
I would have my son use baking soda and water before using a fluoridated toothpaste. No.
What about us? What about adults?
I would imagine you guys have decent dental health. So why expose yourself? Yeah, you better have really good dental health after everything.
I spend a lot of time, money, and effort on my teeth, so they better be okay.
So unless somebody's significantly high risk and doesn't have access to an alternative, fluoride should be out. That's
This
the
is
short
wild.
version.
It's
So
just
let me
wild.
go back, if you don't mind, because I want to talk about other stuff too, but a couple of things there. So we do have some regulations. So the EU coming out now and actually putting some regulations out there on what's an acceptable particle size. And don't ask me that number off the top of my head, but we do have some regulation now. So, Christian's in Spain, if he's getting hydroxyapatite, it's gone through a process of what's acceptable. You mentioned something else, the FDA. And this is the one thing that everybody always hits me with is, the FDA would never allow toothpaste, or that's bad for you, right? And the thing is, the FDA has only intervened with toothpaste one time throughout the history of toothpaste and fluoride. And the only time the FDA intervened was to put a poison label on the back of toothpaste to say that if you swallow it, call poison control. FDA has zero effect on water that's put into, the FDA has zero jurisdiction over water fluoridation. That's the EPA. And water fluoridation started actually before the EPA existed. It had a different name back then. So there's a misconception on what people think the FDA does. The FDA just, when they approve something, they're just saying that within a short period of time, it will not kill you. The FDA is not, the FDA is, because we're going to talk about airway appliances, and there's a lot of bad actors in the airway world. and they're making devices that they're saying are FDA approved. And we have enough information to suggest that some of these airway treatments, will make your mouth worse, will make your teeth worse. But what they got their FDA approval on was it just won't kill you in a short amount of time.
Well, listen, coming from someone who, the company I started has over 10 FDA approvals. Their main goal when we would apply for an FDA approval was to make sure that we weren't harming patients. And what we were doing at Pearl was basically saying, first of all, a software can't really harm patients. It's ultimately up to the practitioner how he or she sees a radiograph. It's just pointing out areas of interest. So there, in my experience, it's come from, will it not harm people? But I think maybe the extreme is like, will it not kill somebody?
And the issue that we run into with dentistry is because dentistry and medicine are, isolated in these silos. When they're looking at toothpaste, or when they're talking about fluoride, they're talking to dentists, right? And as dentists, we're only thinking about what it does to our teeth.
That's a great point right there.
Mm.
Right?
Because so they're saying this won't hurt your teeth.
Yeah, directly.
So
I'm
are
trying
we
to
all going to switch over to baking soda and water?
in the morning for sure. Everybody
And
that
also, I guess like what I'm trying to understand is like all these side effects of fluoride. Is this
Mhm.
only if you swallow the fluoride toothpaste?
Well, yes, which sounds like everybody's immediate reaction is, well, I don't do that. They've done studies. You do. You,
You know,
you do. It's happening. It's like
man,
the patient, you ask them like, does it hurt if you drink something? They're like, I drink on that side. I'm like, it's going everywhere. You're not controlling that liquid. So it does go everywhere. You know, um,
The worst is the drinking water.
the well, it's more that's more cumulative, right? So when in the US, when they just have a kid sit with a fluoride tray in their mouth for 2 minutes, that's the worst.
And
That's
that's
Kyle,
the
you were
what
saying?
dentists don't want to be gone because they're making revenue off of that.
Yeah, I wanted to say this for you guys, so no, you guys don't get canceled. The biggest argument,
We don't care.
yeah, the biggest argument that I get from, I know when there's an actual concerned person that wants to challenge the science, and I love that. But I know a lot of the people that come after me, if tomorrow Delta Dental said we're not covering fluoride treatments anymore, but we're covering hydroxyapatite varnish, they would change dogma overnight.
So true.
And it's a financial thing. It's for pediatric practices, they make their money by doing exams. Pediatric practices lose money when they do treatment, or at least they don't make nearly as much when they do treatment. So they want to do exams and hand things off. And one of the easiest money makers is just sit there and put a fluoride tray in somebody's mouth. So it hurts
Messed
bottom
up.
line.
I think we can all think of drugs that have come on the market and then gone off of the market because later we realize that there's a problem, like how Christian was saying. And fen was one of those. If you knew anybody that was really overweight in the 90s and all of a sudden they lost a bunch of weight, more than likely they were on fen. This was really before gastric bypass. They were on fen. Now, what happened with many of those people is they got very sick. Fen was one of these drugs that actually had the commercial that said explosive diarrhea was one of the side effects, and so people were being extremely dehydrated. I mean, there were some big problems. So anything that comes and is FDA approved, I think sometimes we can still realize afterwards that there were problems with that once we know and have some more long-term studies.
If you think of any ad that you see on TV for any drug that's FDA approved, the last 30 seconds is that really fast lawyer voice.
Yeah. Fentanyl may cause also your brain may explode. You may lose your legs. You may become a total idiot. Yeah.
I'm suggesting you be that voice for fluoride. Like, yeah, you'll bring cavity levels down a little bit, but it might also cause this, and this. And we just don't get that other end in the dental world right now. It's
So
either,
if you're listening to this, you can pretty much tell your patients, stop with the fluoride. Like we're at that place right now.
And don't drink tap water.
Yeah.
replace the fluoride. replace.
So if that's the case, I think that we can all align on the fact that non-invasive has always been the best choice, which obviously Christian, you're the king of, which brings us to Victor, our next topic that you're a specialist in. So why don't you kick us off by telling us, why do people grind?
Ooh,
Another
okay,
light
yeah,
topic.
yeah, that's it. So what we know is people people will always answer that. Patients will always answer that they grind because of stress, and that's true during the day. And that's a huge thing that we have to change in dentistry is people that grind their teeth at night are doing it because they're not breathing well. And it's an effort, it's a reactionary effort of somebody trying to open up their airway. So the heavier, more destructive grinding that's happening is happening during the day. And the grinding that's happening at night is significantly less detrimental, but there's a clear reason why it's happening, and it's because somebody can't breathe properly.
It's less detrimental, meaning that it's causing less tooth structure loss.
Correct. So it's not great, but we know that the forces applied at night are not as strong as what's happening during the day, but it just sounds worse because you're more aware of the sound of what's happening at night, mostly due to how dry the mouth is when you're sleeping. Salivary production goes down. Tooth on tooth wear sounds worse when it's bone to bone. And the more detrimental, stronger effect of grinding is during the day where nobody's wearing a night guard.
Okay, so Victor, help me understand this as if I'm a 5-year-old dentist.
Okay.
How does Airway correlate with grinding?
Okay. Fantastic question. So, right off the bat, the answer that we've always been given is that it's stress, right? And if you're that stressed, you're not asleep. So,
Mm,
there's another answer for this. And if I'm explaining this to a 5-year-old, if 5-year-olds, what they will do with their siblings is they'll mess with each other, and sometimes they'll hold somebody's nose when they're sleeping. And when you don't get all the air you need when you're sleeping, your body fights back. Your body will do what it needs to do to be able to breathe again. And when somebody develops sleep apnea, the older person that develops sleep apnea and they snore through the night, they're not fighting back. They're slowly choking throughout the night. So what's happening when somebody grinds their teeth at night, for the majority of people, again, for the majority of people, what they're trying to do is move their jaw unconsciously to be able to open up their windpipe and get some oxygen to the back of their throat.
okay. And how do we know this?
So, well, the short answer is sleep studies. So when we actually turn to our friends in the medical world, like if you talk to a pulmonologist or a sleep center technician, when they're watching people sleep, now we have these home sleep tests. But for a number of decades, the only way to get sleep data was actually to go into a lab, and they put a bunch of monitors on you and video cameras, as creepy as that might be, and they would watch to see where, when you have an obstruction, which is an actual obstruction of your airway, when you're not able to get all the oxygen you need down the back of your throat, they would look to see what you would do. One of those things, so anybody who's ever heard of restless leg syndrome, is so that for by and large, that is an issue with REM sleep. And a lot of people, even if you don't know much about sleep, have heard of REM sleep. It's a certain stage of sleep. And what happens during REM sleep is that your body is supposed to paralyze. Your REM stands for rapid eye movement, and even that's kind of a misnomer. It's they would watch people sleep and they would look at their eyes darting around and go, "Wow, that guy's eye is moving rapidly." And what was really happening was that the rest of the person was actually paralyzed. And the reason we do this is so we don't act out our dreams. It's an evolutionary thing. So if you're fighting somebody in bed, you're not punching your bedmate and or falling out of your bed. So what ends up happening in REM, you're supposed to be able to paralyze properly. And when our airways are not working properly and we go into paralysis, we'll start to choke and we will start to move to be able to open our airway back up again. So the side to side movement, which is the majority of nighttime grinding, is an effort, a subconscious effort to be able to move your jaw in a way, get your tongue out of the way and get some air to the back of your throat.
I know I see this all the time because I sedated a lot of people in my practice because I did a lot of surgery. And it's funny how when I learned all that I learned about Airway from Victor, by the way, Victor is my Airway Sherpa over the last 5 years. Once he started explaining things, it made so much sense to me because when I was sedating people and I was in charge of their life and they were unconscious, and I would see this to where their tongue would kind of go back in their throat and their oxygen saturation would be high, right? It'd be 98, 97. Then it'd go beep, 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 beep. And then, it's, 88. And then I would come in, either grab their tongue, pull it out, or head tilt chin lift. And they go, and I would see this happen. And that is what's happening when people are sleeping, that they don't realize is they're in this unconscious state where something isn't obstructed. Their oxygen saturation goes down enough to where their brain kind of says, we got to do something. Like, we're willing to bring them out of sleep to wake them up so they can breathe.
That's
Your
wild.
head tilt chin lift is like the first step of CPR. It's self-imposed CPR. So your body's CPRing yourself to get you to be able to breathe better because your need to breathe supersedes everything else.
And Victor, you really changed how I think about ortho. So I think in dentistry, we think about ortho as let's make the teeth look pretty and let's make the bite good and let's make it easier for them to clean, right? And let's wait until we have all of the permanent teeth in the mouth before we kind of do anything. And ortho, you walk into an orthodontist office anywhere in the world right now, and most of the patients are 12 to 18, let's say, right? Mm-hmm. And you really changed how I think of ortho because you made me think that ortho is mostly for growing the bone so that the teeth can fit in well and the patient can breathe better. Can you expand on that a little more?
Yeah, expand is a good
That's
pun.
true.
So I would argue that like Edward Angle is like rolling in his grave because he understood this, and he understood that you have to assume that we're making this assumption that the jaws are grown out into the right place when we're treating somebody. And, Angle came along with his classification of molars and canines, but he always said, you always have to look back, and everybody that preceded him said, look at the jaws first. And then he came along with a classification system to just kind of help start the first ortho school. And everybody forgot everything that came before that. So we have enough data to suggest that our jaws have gotten smaller on a macro level over hundreds and thousands of years. And we know on a micro level, just in the last 100 years, it's precipitously getting smaller, and soft foods have something to say about that. So we know enough about nutrition to suggest that you wouldn't start feeding your children like healthy foods when they're 12 or 13, right? You want to set them up for success as early as you possibly can. And the same goes for jaw development. Like your goal is to be able to help a child develop properly as soon as you can. Why would you wait for a pathology first and then, reverse engineer some treatment there?
Which is mostly what we do in dentistry is we wait for problems to happen and then we fix them and we get paid to fix them instead of getting paid to prevent them.
That's it. There's, what's the profit motive? What does insurance pay for? What are our patients expecting us to do? Right. So the cool thing about this is that parents are understanding this. Moms are semi-doctors themselves at this point, thanks to social media and the internet. So they're understanding the need for this, and they're the ones pushing this movement maybe the most, is that they want to set their kids up for success, and they want to help their kids grow healthier faces as early as possible.
So for everybody listening, my son, well, because of Victor really enlightened me on this. My son had his tongue tie procedure done. We realized he was tongue tied when he was about 3. So we had it done when he was 3 or 4. I can't remember. We started ortho when he was 4. He's now 8. He's still in ortho because we're just trying to maximize this and grow his bones to make him breathe better. but he doesn't snore anymore. You know, when he was 2 and 3, I was sending Victor videos and he was snoring as a 2 or 3-year-old. And now he doesn't. And part of that is because when children are young, their sutures are not closed and it's very easy to grow bone.
Mhm.
Now, we can still do it in adults. It's just a little more complicated, which maybe is another topic. But I believe, and I don't know, Victor, if you agree with me, I think the first ortho exam should be at 3.
Yeah. I mean, the earlier the better, right? So if there's a pathological reason, if there's grinding of the teeth before that, if there's snoring before that, then that's the cue. But you know, there's a time somewhere around 3 to 3.5 where our tonsils and adenoids actually grow faster than our jaws do. So every kid kind of gets to their worst in that time. And then the jaws tend to catch up for some people and don't for others. And those are the kids who end up needing to get things cut out of them, which is not great. So if you can get in front of that number, which is 3, I think that's a fantastic idea.
And Victor, talking about tonsils and adenoids, can you explain if you're familiar with the study that I think our friend and my orthodontist, Dr. Yoon, did, where they did tonsils and adenoids and expansion on different kids? Can you talk about that study?
Yeah, absolutely. So Audrey Yoon and a group of orthodontists put together, they published a study a
This
couple of
is
years
with the
ago.
Stanford group, right?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
I think I think they did it in private practice though. So
Right.
I think I would have to go back and look. But a lot of those people were trained at Stanford sleep lab, which is where the vast majority of sleep information comes from. It's where the word apnea was invented. So what they basically found out was if a kid is diagnosed with needing their tonsils and adenoids removed, that if you do ortho alone, that in over 40% of the cases, those tonsils and adenoids will actually shrink. It will shrink to a point where the surgery is no longer necessary. And in the kids that still need the surgery, they do significantly better if it's coupled with ortho. If my child needed his tonsils and adenoids out, and he was in the mild category, I would do ortho first. There's no chance of losing your child to early intervention ortho. There is a little bit with, unfortunately, every year, more than 0 kids don't make it out of a tonsil and adenoid surgery. And by simply expanding them first, you might be able to avoid, you know, a moderately invasive surgery that has some risk associated with it. And even if my child still needed that surgery, I know that I'm maximizing the benefits of it by just simply doing orthodontics.
It's tragic that people don't know that.
If that doesn't create like such a great advertisement for ortho, I don't know what can, you know. It's like you can do tonsils and adenoids, or you can do simple expansion, and you may have the same results. One is very invasive, one is very non-invasive. Now, it's not every case, right? But
Yeah.
what a minimally invasive way to attempt to avoid a more invasive surgery. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do the surgery, because I was very willing to do the surgery with my son. But what a great intervention that we can do and be preventative.
Want to emphasize something. I'm just listening here and learning. You mentioned something that I think we should all learn as dentists and repeat to ourselves. No, ideal ortho is helping bone to grow, and teeth will follow. And the whole concept of ortho is inverted, right? We miss the opportunity with the bone, and then we try to fit teeth into whatever is left. Uh, we
So
we
true.
still see so many orthodontists too fixated on alignment and class 1 and ignoring 100 things that are more important than that.
And Christian, I think with that, you have problems that people do in order to make the teeth fit in those small jaws. Then we start extracting teeth, right? Then we're doing all this other stuff. We're trying to make it fit. We're making the round peg fit in the square hole.
Still today, we see people thinking about extracting teeth to fit the teeth in the arch.
I was just DMing with a kid in ortho residency. I don't want to name which ortho residency he's in, but he's saying that most of his instructors are premolar instructors. They are just following by and it just goes to show like there's only 68 ortho residencies in the country, and ortho residencies are not keeping up. Like, first of all, 90% of ortho practices of ortho residencies out there are teaching braces instead of aligners when you can get the same results with aligners as you get with braces. And Victor, I just wanted to share, I'm so happy that as a general dentist, you are studying this because my biggest revelation, my first revelation on the fact that dentistry is so antiquated was when I transitioned from dental school to ortho residency. And I learned in ortho residency all the functional and preventative nature of ortho treatment. And I was like, why didn't I just learn this at NYU, the biggest dental school in the country? And like, here my colleagues are, like, the dental experts of patients all around the Northeast, and they don't know these fundamentals.
Yeah, it's actually frustrating because, you know, people will ask me, they'll say like, "Oh, do you, you know," they think I enjoy the fact that I know stuff that isn't well known. It's actually wildly frustrating. I have a cosmetic practice in West Hollywood, Beverly Hills. That's how I pay my bills. Like this, this shouldn't be. I shouldn't be here. This should be just taught in school, and it shouldn't be this like secret that we're trying to get out to the world. And orthodontists have such a tremendous impact. We're just talking about tonsils and adenoids. We were talking about cognitive effects of fluoride before. The cognitive effect of being hypoxic, of kids not getting the oxygen they need, is significantly greater. Like you can help a kid so much by helping them grow their jaws out into the right place and being able to breathe earlier. You know, by 7 years old, you have 70% or more of your overall brain development is finished by that age. And we're not intervening orthodontically. We're not even doing the first checkup till after that. So we've missed these huge windows to be able to help people, and we have the tools to do it.
This is so frustrating for me, Victor, is because of you, start being the annoying parent talking to my friends. But then also my friends know that I'm a dentist, so they'll ask me about ortho. And I'm always like, yes, go see an orthodontist, you know, as soon as possible. And then they go to the orthodontist and the orthodontist says, well, come
Send them
back when
home.
all the permanent teeth are in. And
Yeah,
I'm like,
that's what I was gonna say. I had well, my kid. I took to several orthodontists, and they said no, it's not time yet. But that's the concept. It's they're mixing, they're inverting the thing. It's not about the teeth. It's about the bone. Teeth will follow, right? So when is the moment where you have more control of the bone, or it can impact bone growth the most? Is the younger you intervene, the better, and you help the body follow. And if you give a little push, the body will react so beautifully, you know, to compensate this problem of our jaws growing less than ideal today. You know,
the patients will compensate too. I'll tell you, my son, as a 4-year-old, was a better aligner patient than my patients that were in my practice that were
That's how it is.
40, 50, 60 years old.
Kids are better.
breathing, that for parents, you know, breathing is a process that shouldn't require effort. We shouldn't have to put pressure and energy. It should be natural. When you see a kid 4 years old sleeping, and you see that they're, even if it's a subtle effort, you know, you can help that process. It should be natural.
This is going to bring the mouth back into the body for sure.
Yeah.
That's what I love, and I know Christian, you too, love with Airway, is that we're finally doing more than making people chew better, getting them out of pain, and, you know, making them smile.
So, Victor, I'm super curious. I mean, the thing is, you figured out how to implement ortho into your beautiful Beverly Hills practice. For our listeners, you know, for people who don't know, 60% of US counties do not have access to an orthodontist. So, like, just refer isn't an option. And also,
Mhm.
to Kyle and Christian's point, a lot of orthodontists are learning backwards, super antiquated literature. So, how did you integrate ortho from an Airway perspective into your practice?
So that's a great question. I want to go back because I don't want to. I want to make make it very clear, I got into this for very selfish reasons. My practice was based on putting as much porcelain on as many teeth possible. That's how I pay my bills. And when I made this connection, the reason I made the connection was I wanted to stop porcelain from breaking. And I knew a night guard didn't do it, right? And that's what led me to Airway was before I had a child and before, I wanted to help people on a more systemic level. I just wanted to protect my work. And that's how I got into it. And that it's once I saw all the side effects, all the positive side effects of helping people breathe properly, that's when it took hold, right? And I figured this was a no-brainer. And you mentioned I'm in Beverly Hills, I'm in Los Angeles, a hyper saturated market with dentists. I thought this was going to be the easiest thing ever. I get to go to my friends and go, hey, you know how it's wildly competitive. Everyone's worried about DSOs and competition. Here's here's a biohack. Here's a secret. Before everyone catches on, you'll get to treat so many more people and help them, impact them on such a deeper level. And now you're treating at 4 years old and you'll get to see them again at 12. You get to treat patients twice instead of first. I thought this was going to be the easiest sell. And like you guys mentioned, orthodontists were like, no, we're good. We know what we need to know. So in a long roundabout way, I was kind of forced to do it. I knew what the correct answer was, and at the time in 2016 or 17, I couldn't get anybody else on board. And now we have a team, and now I'll still do a lot of ortho myself, but I'm very, very lucky that I have orthodontists that are on board and beyond on board. The person probably most responsible from an orthodontic standpoint is Dr. Audrey Yoon, and she's in LA and she's in private practice. So now I have amazing referrals, but it was out of necessity. Originally, it was out of necessity. And I think why this can take hold is when I hear other dentists, and you guys interview dentists, like, and Kyle talks to people who are struggling with mental resilience and the business of dentistry. I think this is the beautiful marriage of where we can help people and help our practices together. We can, this is stuff that DSOs are not interested in. This gives us a competitive advantage. And it's kind of a roundabout answer, but I was forced to do it at first, and now it's growing. And now I have a team that's involved.
Victor, a couple of conclusions here. I want you to confirm this. If I'm a dentist that I'm starting to see this potential, I want to explore, concept number one you talked about is a modern society for more than several centuries are making the jaws grow less. Period. Right?
Yes.
So problems that didn't happen 500 years ago are happening more now. The main problem that comes from lack of jaw development is space. There's just less space. The main impact of less space is that there's less airway and you need to fight to breathe. And when you're when you're sleeping, that's where the problem becomes even worse because of several reasons, period, as well, right? The dentist is there sitting in front of the patient with the opportunity to become the number one most important healthcare provider to identify and to coordinate the possible treatments.
And to prevent the sequelae.
and to intervene early as possible. So now my question, what are the main things? Let's divide our life in periods and see what are the tools that we can play with as we grow. You guys said, let's bring it down into 3 years old and start to use orthopedic approaches to help, grow the jaws. If you could give us insights about what a dentist should be looking from 3 to 7, looking and maybe doing. What can you do as kids enter? If you miss that opportunity, what can be done as a teenager? How can we help teenagers with this? If you miss that, young adult, because we know another concept that is clear. The older it gets, the less impactful are the solution the solutions, right? Or it's harder to fix it, right? If Kyle had a dentist, if you were the dentist of Kyle when Kyle was 3 years old, you would probably be doing even better with less invasive procedures. So then you get 30 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old, and we know, like, until recently, people would only start talking when the person was like 75, snoring at the highest level possible and not sleeping at all, with all the systemic consequences of that already in place, with very little room to reverse. So if you could guide me through the process of
And
what
the
can we
crazy
do?
thing, Christian, is I'm the son of a dentist.
Yeah,
But we just didn't know that back then,
yeah,
you know?
was absolutely not a topic at all
Yeah.
until the 90s, I would say. It was
Yeah. And even my son, you know, like even 5 years ago when I started my son on this, I had to have a speech pathologist tell me that my son was tongue-tied. I didn't even catch it. Isn't that crazy?
And in Los Angeles, they check when your child is born. They have lactation consultants checking for it. Like, we're lucky enough to live somewhere where they check for it, but they check for it incorrectly.
Yeah, we're lucky that Southern California has kind of become like a mecca, maybe not even Southern California, California in general has kind of become a mecca for Airway.
Yep. Great question. I'll try to keep it concise. So from literally from birth, you want to be able to, ideally, and it's tough to say this as a man, but ideally, breastfeeding is the first step. So that helps. That sets from day one. That makes a tremendous difference in jaw development, right? So if possible. Now, funny enough, knowing this information, it just didn't work out for my son. So I already knew we had a deficit that we had to overcome. And then from there, then you're looking at habits. So from 0 to 3, to put it in a bucket, you're looking at any sort of grinding at night, snoring at night, any
Tongue thrusting?
tongue thrusting is something you won't, if you're able to observe it, for sure. Lactation issues is the issue with tongue thrusting is you don't usually see the result of that, especially as a parent, until you see like flared anterior teeth.
Hmm.
So you don't really know what's happening, before those kid. Pacifier use, and that's where tongue thrusting might come into play. So why a pacifier is pacifying is it's creating a seal. So it's allowing that child to be able to breathe through the nose properly, right? So we existed for a few thousand years before pacifiers were invented. So extended use of a pacifier is something I would look for. And then there's something that's going on it's kind of ironic because people are doing it not realizing why it's beneficial. So there's a movement called baby-led weaning. And in case you're not familiar with this is having kids chew on hard foods while their teeth are developing, even though they can't eat the food yet necessarily. So a child with like 2 teeth or even just their gums, they're gnawing on like a carrot, but they're not getting the nutritional benefit of the carrot necessarily. But the benefit of that is by chewing on these harder foods, instead of just like applesauce in the US, that appositional growth is taking place because there's a fight going on. So from 0 to 3, you want stimulation, you just want natural growth. You want like caveman baby growth, like what would have happened thousands of years ago. After that, then you have habit correctors. So if you have a child that's 3 to 7 years old, and if they have any of these issues, there's kinds of removable plastic habit correctors, myofunctional correctors that are easy for children to tolerate because they're almost like pacifiers on steroids. That's kind of an easier thing for kids to be able to tolerate. We just talked about orthodontic interventions, which if you're lucky enough to have a provider that will intervene, obviously sooner is best. Dr. Audrey Yoon, who treated Kyle and is a friend of mine, I've seen her do Invisalign on a 2.5-year-old. So, it's what do you have access to? But if you're living somewhere kind of remote and this sounds like a different world to you, you can order a Mayo munchie online and have it shipped to you, and pretty much anywhere in the world. After 7 years old, and when the general orthodontic community will acknowledge your existence, well, then that's where you would, turn to your orthodontist to intervene, hopefully in a non-retractive way.
Mhm.
And that's where we lose our orthodontic friends so much when we talk about extraction, because everybody will point to, well, there's always that one case that needed it. Sure. And there are instances, there's always exceptions to the rule, but then move those wisdom teeth up, just gain that maxillary with an anterior movement. I don't care less about how many premolars you have. I care where the jaw sits in the face, right? So as we develop, jaws are getting sutures are starting to close more, and things are getting harder to intervene with. So when you get it out of your teens, depending on your gender, there's still non-invasive treatments. There's expanders that still work in the early 20s. And then anything after that, now you're getting a little bit more invasive. So we have these amazing custom rapid palatal expanders now that have a ridiculously high success rate, from 25 onto I believe a 75-year-old was treated by
You're talking
Mariana.
about mini screw assisted, correct?
Yeah. So now,
Bone-borne palatal expanders.
So this is
Bone-
MARP-E if people have heard this.
Yeah.
you guys are amazing for my ADHD. Yes. So now there's an implant, but there's no surgery involved. And it has
Oh, wow.
there's a ridiculously high success rate. And the implants are actually placed by orthodontists who don't want to do much with their hands, no offense, but they'll even place these implants. That's how plug and play and easy that is. And then you have the world of orthognathic surgery, which Kyle, I know you had, but I'll let you attest to this. The issue with orthognathic surgery, and I'm a huge fan of it, is there's a huge hurdle to qualify for it. And typically people that need it, assuming they want it, which that's a huge hurdle in itself. If somebody wants it, now they have to jump through a lot of hurdles and red tape, at least in the US, to get it.
It's expensive, it's time consuming, and there's not a
But
lot
I
of
think there's an intermediate.
providers that
There's an
provide it. What were you saying, Christian?
we're seeing the growth of an intermediate solution, surgically
Yes.
facilitated orthodontic, therapy, changing the phenotype, corticotomies, grafting, and then moving teeth, combined with palatal expanders. We are finally seeing solutions that are allowing us to make these treatments more reasonable.
Yeah. And that the sub orthognathics world is now what I'm starting to teach, because this is a big piece of the puzzle that just didn't exist for the longest time. And we always have to acknowledge orthognathic surgery, because our medical colleagues will not take us seriously if we don't acknowledge that's the most severe change you can make. But the issue is, realistically, not a lot of people want it or can afford it or can jump through the hurdles to get through it. So up until
Victor, I
now,
would say there's a lot of people that want it, actually. Now that I'm a patient and a dentist, and I'm on these Facebook groups with like jaw surgery Facebook groups, there are a ton of people that want it. Biggest problem is they can't afford it. It's very expensive. And if it's not covered by insurance, they just can't do it. I mean, there's people begging every day, like, is there a way that I can do it? But, it's $20, $30, $40, $50,000 treatment. If insurance isn't covering it, it's very expensive. Also, there's not a lot of doctors that specialize in it. There's a lot of oral surgeons that kind of dabble in it, which I don't believe is the correct way to do it. And the people that are doing it, if they're getting paid by insurance, the reason many oral surgeons aren't doing it is because they don't get paid very well for it by insurance. So they have to be out of network for it to make sense, which then makes it challenging for people to do. So
I agree with that. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I agree with that, because I am that person. I'm as class 2 as you can get. I have no jaw. I would love to do it, but it's the downtime, right? So just from I meant the whole package. So like, I have friends who are orthodontic surgeons who I would hope hook me up, but I just can't get the downtime right now
Yeah.
in my practice to do it.
But you
So
know that techniques are changing as well. We see some new surgeons utilizing minimally invasive, guided, completely digitally planned and guided procedures with pre-manufactured
Yes.
appliances that the surgeries are. It's like double jaw in 1 hour. It's like insane.
I don't know if you name names on the pod. Like, I think you might be referring to David Alfie,
Yeah.
who
Exactly. Yeah.
who's a
Yeah.
who's a friend, and he's getting it down to insanely short amounts of time
Yeah.
using USD. So it's growing, but I always want to acknowledge the orthodontic because when we don't, our medical colleagues kind of go, well, these guys aren't serious about this, and any orthodontic surgeon will tell you, or sleep surgeon will tell you, that the best results are when people get orthodontic at 30. So even of the pool of people that would benefit from it, very few people are getting it at that age. Because more often than not, they don't qualify as being unhealthy enough to get it at that age. So
Mm.
so by having these newer treatments, we're able to hit the biggest piece of the bell curve.
I think you hit a very important topic here. You know, they don't qualify because in general, healthcare doesn't see the problem as a big problem or big enough, right? So the key is to connect these sub symptoms or these light symptoms into very, very relevant, important health issues, right? So, and you change completely the perspective. So if you're feeling this, that until a few years ago, it didn't mean much. Nowadays, when you feel this, it means all of this.
Well,
Is a
Christian, I'm a great example of this. So, Victor knows because I sent my mother to him for Airway. My mom was the reason why I got into Airway because she has sleep apnea, she has restless leg syndrome, and I didn't want to turn into her. And so it makes sense from a healthcare standpoint to pay for my surgery when I'm 40 so that I don't have 40 years of treatment that you have to pay for, right? It makes sense to spend the money and the time up front for me so that I can be healthier for the next 40 years.
And it's better financially for the health system in general if politicians and governments start to think a little bit ahead.
Of
Well, and
course.
even so,
Of course.
so first generation being like my parents, right? Both of them have sleep apnea. I was fixed midlife, but then my son we're fixing when he was 4.
Before you,
That is
I,
really the way that we can prevent all these problems from happening.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to intervene from a much more cynical standpoint than what Christian said. So the health insurance companies actually know this because they do data, right? They have all the data available to them, so they know all the affiliated issues with breathing poorly. They know all the inflammation in your body, so they're drawing a line. That's what insurance is drawing a line on when we're willing to intervene on this train wreck. And they have basically drawn a line in a place where by the time we approve you for the surgery, you'll probably not live to qualify for it
Oh
because of all
God.
the other stuff. They know if you have sleep apnea, we already know what it does for heart disease and heart attacks and stuff like that.
Diabetes and depression and everything.
And if I know it, a multi-billion-dollar insurance company knows it in significantly more detail, right? They have all the data.
You're right.
So they're drawing a line. It's not that they didn't know about it. They're just like, they're counting on those other things to get you before you qualify for this expensive surgery.
That's stark. Well, Victor, I'm really happy that you brought up the second half of this podcast, the importance of ortho, because as you know, I'm an orthodontist and it's so important that people integrate ortho, that GPs integrate orthos into their practice, which I'm so happy you highlighted. And a quick plug is that, as you mentioned, it's really hard to find really good orthodontists. And I don't mean good from like they're really good with their hands. I mean like advanced orthodontists in terms of advanced philosophy. with Airway and with aligners. And part of what Two Front does is bring those orthodontists. We vet orthodontists to bring virtually, remotely into dental practices. And so for anyone in the United States who's listening, if you want to bring in an orthodontist who is focused on airways, focused on aligners to your practice, you can do so with Two Front with no additional cost, no additional workflow issues, no additional chair time. So quick plug for anyone looking to bring in an orthodontist. But Dr. Victor, thank you for everything on the show. Where can people find you?
I'm gonna have a copyright infringement here. So Airway Smile Design is a course we are launching. So myself and another general dentist who does her own ortho, Tracy Nguyen. So Airway Smile Design, a very basic website right now, but we have a sign-up sheet for people interested, particularly professionals who want to learn more about this. Instagram, I throw in these pearls when I can in between kind of before and after cosmetic cases. So Dr. Victor DDS is great. I'm available, DM anytime. Between those two places, I'm very easily reachable. I love our profession and I poke fun and try to instigate arguments from time to time just to get a conversation going. So please don't hesitate. I enjoy having these
And
conversations.
Ingrid, I think we need to get Victor back on to talk about business as well, because, we talked a lot of
100%.
clinical today, but he's created a great business doing good work, which is like, I think people think it's one or the other. He does
Yeah.
very high quality work. He does cosmetic stuff. He does cosmetic stuff with Airway together. He has a great associate and he has a good business. And so I think we should have him on today and try to avoid not talking about Airway for an hour, but talk about business management and leadership as well.
But guys, you mentioned, Victor is gonna come on the podcast. He's gonna be controversial because he has some controversial perspectives. I have to tell you that there was no controversy at all. Maybe there's controversies with other people that don't see what we are seeing. But we are pretty much on the same page on these two
Totally.
topics, and we need to just talk much more about it.
Yeah, we need to get the 95% of dentistry to come into this decade.
And honestly, like I know we talk about the frustrations with dental school, but like that's the beauty of this podcast is like we can teach people through the podcast by featuring people like you.
Well, I really appreciate that and thank you guys for having me on.